Fasting in Islam is one of the most profound acts of worship that Allah has prescribed for believers. At first glance, many people think fasting simply means staying away from food and drink from dawn until sunset. While this is certainly part of it, the true purpose of fasting goes much deeper than physical restraint. Allah did not command fasting merely to make people feel hungry or thirsty. Instead, fasting was prescribed as a powerful spiritual training designed to purify the heart, discipline the soul, and strengthen a person's relationship with Allah. In the Quran, Allah explains the purpose of fasting in a clear and powerful way. He says that fasting has been prescribed for believers just as it was prescribed for those before them, so that they may attain taqwa. Taqwa refers to a deep awareness and consciousness of Allah. It means living with the constant realization that Allah sees everything we do, hears everything we say, and knows what is hidden in our hearts. Through fasting, a believer learns to control their desires and becomes more mindful of Allah in every moment of their life. When a person fasts sincerely, they begin to understand the meaning of self-control. Throughout the day, a fasting person may feel hunger, thirst, fatigue, and weakness. Yet they continue their fast because they know Allah is watching them. Even when they are alone and no one else can see them, they do not eat or drink because their motivation is not the people around them, but their Creator. This internal discipline builds a powerful sense of honesty and integrity in the believer. It teaches them that true obedience to Allah happens even when no one else is watching. Fasting also reminds people of the blessings that they often take for granted. In daily life, food, water, and comfort are easily available to many people. Because these blessings are so common, people sometimes forget how precious they truly are. But during fasting, even a sip of water becomes something deeply desired. The simple act of eating a date at sunset feels like an incredible gift. Through this experience, fasting cultivates gratitude in the heart. A believer begins to appreciate Allah's provisions more deeply and becomes more thankful for the countless blessings that fill their life. Another powerful purpose of fasting is to develop empathy for those who struggle with hunger and poverty. When a person experiences hunger during the fast, they are reminded of the millions of people around the world who live with hunger not for a few hours, but every day. This realization softens the heart and encourages compassion. It motivates believers to give charity, help the needy, and support those who are less fortunate. Ramadan, therefore, becomes a time when generosity and kindness increase among the believers. Fasting also serves as a shield against sin. When a person is fasting, they are reminded throughout the day that they are engaged in an act of worship. This awareness helps them stay away from harmful behaviors. They become more careful about what they say, what they watch, and how they treat others. The Prophet Muhammad taught that fasting is a shield, meaning it protects a person from falling into wrongdoing. If someone tries to provoke a fasting person or draw them into an argument, they are encouraged to respond calmly and remind themselves that they are fasting. Through this process, fasting trains the believer to develop patience. Hunger and thirst require patience. Avoiding anger requires patience. Resisting temptation requires patience. Over time, this patience strengthens a person's character and makes them better equipped to face the challenges of life. The discipline developed during fasting does not only benefit a person during Ramadan, it continues to influence their behavior long after the month ends. The difference between physical fasting and spiritual fasting is something many people overlook. Physical fasting focuses on the external actions of the body. It means abstaining from food, drink, and marital relations during the fasting hours. If a person avoids these things from dawn until sunset, their fast is technically valid according to Islamic law. However, spiritual fasting goes beyond these outward actions. It focuses on the condition of the heart and the behavior of the soul. A person may physically fast, but still engage in behaviors that contradict the spirit of fasting. For example, someone may stay away from food and drink, but spend the day lying, gossiping, arguing, or insulting others. In such cases, the body may be fasting, but the heart and tongue are not. The Prophet Muhammad warned about this situation when he said that some people gain nothing from their fast except hunger and thirst. This powerful statement reminds believers that fasting is meant to transform their entire character, not just their eating habits. Spiritual fasting requires guarding every part of the body from sin. The tongue must be protected from lying, backbiting, and harsh speech. The eyes must be protected from looking at things that are forbidden or inappropriate. The ears must avoid listening to gossip and harmful talk. The hands and feet must stay away from actions that displease Allah. When a believer controls all these aspects, their fast becomes a complete act of worship that purifies both the body and the soul. The heart also plays a central role in spiritual fasting. While the body refrains from physical desires, the heart should turn toward Allah with sincerity. A fasting person should fill their day with remembrance of Allah, reading the Quran, making dua, and reflecting on their actions. Instead of wasting time on meaningless distractions, they should use the opportunity to strengthen their connection with their Creator. Ramadan becomes a time for spiritual renewal where a person cleanses their heart from jealousy, arrogance, and hatred. Another difference between physical and spiritual fasting lies in intention. Physical fasting can sometimes become a routine habit where a person simply follows the daily schedule without deep reflection. But spiritual fasting requires conscious intention and awareness. The believer constantly reminds themselves why they are fasting and what they hope to achieve through it. Their goal is not just to complete the fast, but to earn Allah's pleasure and mercy. Spiritual fasting also transforms the way a person interacts with others. A person who understands the deeper meaning of fasting becomes more patient, more forgiving, and more kind. They avoid arguments and try to maintain peace in their relationships. They become more generous with their wealth and more compassionate toward those around them. In this way, fasting becomes a tool for improving both personal character and social harmony. During Ramadan, the environment of worship encourages believers to focus on spiritual growth. Mosques become filled with people praying together, families gather for care, and communities engage in acts of charity. This atmosphere reminds believers that fasting is part of a larger journey of faith. It is not simply an individual act, but a collective experience that strengthens the bonds of the Muslim community. Ultimately, the goal of fasting is transformation. By the end of Ramadan, a believer should not be the same person they were at the beginning. Their hearts should be softer, their faith stronger, and their actions more aligned with the teachings of Islam. If fasting is done correctly, it leaves a lasting impact on the soul and encourages a person to continue living with taqwa throughout the year. When believers understand the true purpose of fasting and recognize the difference between physical and spiritual fasting, their worship becomes more meaningful. They begin to approach Ramadan not just as a month of hunger and thirst, but as a sacred opportunity to purify their hearts, strengthen their faith, and draw closer to Allah. Fasting is not only about abstaining from food and drink, it is also about protecting the spiritual reward that comes with the act of fasting. Many believers focus on the physical aspects of the fast, making sure they do not eat or drink during the day. But they sometimes overlook the hidden actions that can weaken or even destroy the reward of their fast. These actions may not technically invalidate the fast in the legal sense, but they reduce its spiritual value and prevent a person from receiving the full blessings that fasting is meant to bring. One of the most important realities about fasting is that Allah is not in need of a person's hunger or thirst. The purpose of fasting is the purification of the heart and the strengthening of faith. If someone abstains from food and drink, but continues to engage in sinful behavior, then the deeper purpose of fasting is lost. This is why many scholars remind believers that protecting the fast from sins is just as important as protecting it from food and drink. Hidden actions that weaken the reward of fasting often begin with the habits that people consider small or insignificant. A person may think that certain behaviors are harmless because they do not physically break the fast, but in reality, they slowly chip away at the spiritual reward of the fast. One example is wasting time in meaningless activities. Ramadan is meant to be a month of reflection, worship, and self-improvement. Yet many people spend long hours scrolling through social media, watching entertainment, or engaging in activities that bring no spiritual benefit. While these actions may not break the fast, they distract the heart from remembering Allah and reduce the spiritual gains that could have been achieved. Another hidden action that weakens the reward of fasting is neglecting acts of worship. When someone is fasting, they should increase their connection with Allah through prayer, reading the Quran, and making dua. However, some people continue their normal routine without making any effort to strengthen their worship. They may delay their prayers or perform them quickly without focus. They may go through the entire day without opening the Quran or remembering Allah. In such cases, the fast becomes an empty routine rather than a meaningful act of devotion. Complaining about fasting is another subtle action that weakens its reward. When a person constantly talks about how hungry or tired they feel, they shift their focus away from the spiritual purpose of the fast. Fasting is meant to teach patience and gratitude. By complaining frequently, a person risks turning an act of worship into a burden that they resent. Instead of complaining, believers are encouraged to remember that their patience is being recorded by Allah and that every moment of difficulty carries a reward. Showing off acts of worship is another hidden danger during fasting. Ramadan is a time when people naturally increase their good deeds, but sometimes the desire for recognition can enter the heart. A person might talk about how much Quran they have read, how many nights they have prayed, or how much charity they have given. While sharing encouragement can sometimes be beneficial, seeking praise from others can damage the sincerity of the act. Fasting is meant to be a private act between the believer and Allah, and its beauty lies in its sincerity. Neglecting kindness and compassion is also a hidden way that people weaken their fast. A person may fast all day but still treat others harshly. They may become impatient with family members, rude to co-workers, or dismissive toward those who need help. However, fasting is meant to soften the heart and improve character. If a person finishes Ramadan with the same harsh attitude they had before, then they have missed one of the most important lessons of fasting. Another important aspect of fasting that many people overlook is the need to guard the tongue. The tongue is one of the most powerful parts of the body, and it has the ability to either increase a person's reward or destroy it. Words spoken during fasting carry great significance because they reflect the condition of the heart and the level of self-control a person has developed. Guarding the tongue means being mindful of every word that is spoken. When a person is fasting, they should make a conscious effort to avoid harmful speech. This includes lying, gossiping, insulting others, and engaging in arguments. The Prophet Muhammad taught that if someone does not leave false speech and evil actions, then Allah has no need for them to leave their food and drink. This statement highlights how important it is for believers to control their words during fasting. Lying is one of the most damaging forms of speech. Even small lies can weaken the reward of fasting because they contradict the values of honesty and integrity that Islam encourages. When a person lies while fasting, they are allowing their tongue to engage in a behavior that directly opposes the spiritual purpose of fasting. Truthfulness, on the other hand, strengthens the character and brings a person closer to Allah. Gossip and backbiting are also major dangers for the fasting person. Backbiting occurs when someone speaks negatively about another person behind their back, even if what they say is true. During Ramadan, conversations often increase as families and communities gather together. In these moments, it can be easy for discussions to turn into gossip about other people's mistakes, lifestyles, or personal matters. However, every word spoken about another person's faults reduces the reward of the fast and harms the unity of the community. Harsh speech and insults are another way the tongue can damage a fast. When people feel tired or hungry, they may become more irritable and short-tempered. This can lead to arguments, angry words, and hurtful comments. But fasting is meant to train believers to control their anger and remain patient even when they feel uncomfortable. If someone tries to provoke a fasting person into an argument, the correct response is to remain calm and remind oneself that they are fasting. Even excessive or useless talk can affect the quality of a fast. While casual conversation is not forbidden, spending large amounts of time in pointless discussions distracts the heart from remembrance of Allah. The tongue should be used for beneficial speech, such as reciting the Quran, making dhikr, giving advice, or speaking kindly to others. When the tongue is used in this way, it becomes a source of reward rather than a source of regret. Guarding the tongue also includes speaking with kindness and compassion. Ramadan is a time when believers should make extra effort to uplift others through their words. A kind greeting, a sincere compliment, or a comforting statement can brighten someone's day and strengthen relationships. These small acts of kindness reflect the true spirit of fasting and help create an atmosphere of peace and unity. Another important aspect of controlling the tongue is silence at the right moments. Sometimes the best response in a difficult situation is simply to remain quiet. If a conversation begins to turn negative or harmful, choosing silence can protect both the fast and the heart. Silence allows a person to avoid saying something they may later regret and helps maintain the calmness that fasting is meant to develop. Ultimately, the discipline of guarding the tongue during fasting extends beyond Ramadan. When believers practice controlling their speech for an entire month, they develop habits that can continue throughout the year. They become more thoughtful about their words, more aware of the impact their speech has on others, and more committed to using their tongue in ways that please Allah. By understanding the hidden actions that weaken the reward of fasting and by learning to guard the tongue carefully, a believer can transform their fast into a truly powerful act of worship. Instead of simply experiencing hunger and thirst, they experience spiritual growth, self-control, and a deeper connection with Allah. One of the greatest dangers to a person's fast is backbiting, also known in Islam as ghibah. Backbiting occurs when someone speaks about another person in a way that they would dislike if they heard it, even if what is being said is true. Many people underestimate how serious this sin is, especially during Ramadan, when they believe that simply staying away from food and drink is enough. However, the reality is that backbiting can destroy the spiritual reward of fasting and remove many of the blessings that Ramadan brings. Backbiting often happens in everyday conversations. People gather with friends, family, or co-workers and begin discussing the lives of others. At first, it may seem harmless, but gradually the conversation shifts toward criticizing someone's behavior, appearance, or personal life. What begins as casual talk can quickly turn into a discussion that damages someone's reputation. During fasting, such conversations become even more harmful because they contradict the purpose of the fast, which is to purify the heart and control the tongue. Islam strongly warns against backbiting because it harms both the speaker and the person being spoken about. The Quran gives a powerful image when describing this sin by comparing it to eating the flesh of one's dead brother. This comparison shows how disgusting and destructive backbiting truly is. When a person fasts but continues to speak negatively about others, they are allowing their tongue to commit a sin while their body is performing an act of worship. This contradiction weakens the spiritual value of the fast and prevents the heart from becoming pure. One of the reasons backbiting is so common is because people often justify it to themselves. They might say that they are only telling the truth, or that they are sharing information for a good reason. Sometimes people disguise backbiting as concern or advice, claiming that they are simply discussing someone's problems. But if the conversation would embarrass or hurt the person being discussed, then it falls into the category of backbiting. Ramadan should be a time when believers become more aware of these habits and make a sincere effort to eliminate them. Backbiting also creates division and resentment within communities. When people talk negatively about others, it damages trust and weakens relationships. Friendships can be destroyed, families can become divided, and misunderstandings can spread quickly. Fasting is meant to strengthen unity among believers, encouraging forgiveness and kindness. Engaging in backbiting works against this goal and spreads negativity instead of harmony. Avoiding backbiting requires conscious effort and self-awareness. A person must learn to recognize when a conversation is turning toward gossip and have the courage to change the subject or remain silent. Sometimes the best way to avoid backbiting is to speak positively about the person being discussed or remind others that Ramadan is a time for better behavior. Even quietly leaving a conversation can protect a person from participating in harmful talk. Fasting provides a powerful opportunity to train the tongue to speak only what is beneficial. When a believer resists the temptation to gossip or criticize others, they are strengthening their self-control and protecting the reward of their fast. Over time, this habit of avoiding backbiting can transform the way a person communicates and help create a more respectful and compassionate environment. Another important issue that many people overlook during fasting is the effect of listening to gossip. While speaking backbiting is clearly harmful, simply listening to gossip without objecting can also weaken the reward of the fast. Many people think that as long as they are not the ones speaking, they are not responsible for the conversation. However, Islam encourages believers not only to avoid committing sins, but also to avoid supporting or encouraging them. Listening to gossip often happens in social gatherings or casual conversations. Someone begins discussing another person's mistakes or personal life, and others listen quietly without saying anything. Even if a person does not add to the conversation, their silence may be seen as approval. This encourages the speaker to continue spreading gossip and makes the listener indirectly involved in the sin. During Ramadan, believers are encouraged to be more mindful of the environments they place themselves in. If a conversation turns toward gossip or criticism of others, the listener has a responsibility to respond in a positive way. This might mean gently reminding the group that speaking about others in this way is not appropriate, especially while fasting. If the conversation does not change, the listener can choose to remain silent or excuse themselves from the discussion. Listening to gossip also affects the condition of the heart. When a person constantly hears negative information about others, it can create feelings of suspicion, judgment, and dislike. These feelings slowly fill the heart with negativity and make it harder to maintain compassion and forgiveness. Ramadan is meant to cleanse the heart from such emotions, replacing them with patience, mercy, and understanding. Another reason listening to gossip is harmful is because it spreads information that may not even be true. In many cases, rumors and stories are exaggerated or misunderstood. When people repeat these stories without verifying them, they contribute to spreading falsehood and harming someone's reputation. Islam places great importance on verifying information before believing or sharing it. A fasting person should be especially careful about what they listen to and what they allow into their mind. Protecting the ears is just as important as protecting the tongue. Just as the mouth must avoid harmful speech, the ears must avoid harmful conversations. When a person fills their ears with gossip, arguments, and negativity, it becomes harder for the heart to focus on remembrance of Allah. On the other hand, listening to beneficial words such as Quran recitation, Islamic reminders, and positive discussions can strengthen faith and increase spiritual awareness. Ramadan offers a unique opportunity to purify both speech and listening habits. Believers are surrounded by reminders of faith, whether through prayers at the mosque, recitation of the Quran, or gatherings focused on worship. Choosing to participate in these positive environments helps replace harmful conversations with meaningful ones. Encouraging good speech within a community can also reduce gossip and backbiting. When people become accustomed to discussing beneficial topics, sharing knowledge, or supporting one another, the culture of gossip begins to fade. Each person who chooses not to participate in gossip contributes to creating a healthier and more respectful environment. Learning to control both speech and listening requires patience and discipline, but the reward is immense. A person who successfully protects their tongue and ears during fasting experiences a deeper sense of peace and spiritual clarity. Their fast becomes more than a physical act. It becomes a complete act of worship involving the entire body and mind. Through avoiding backbiting and refusing to listen to gossip, believers protect the purity of their fast and honor the true purpose of Ramadan. These efforts help cleanse the heart, strengthen relationships, and bring a person closer to Allah through sincerity and self-control.